The cage smelled like burnt metal and fear. Finn pressed his small body against the wall of the storage building, watching the procession move through the colony streets. 4 Morvani warriors carried the cage on their shoulders, their gray skin glistening under the twin suns of Vareth. Inside the cage, something massive shifted in the shadows. Something with scales black as the space between stars. People ran from the streets. Mothers grabbed children. Shopkeepers closed their doors. Everyone in the colony knew what a Stormwing could do. The creatures had ruled this planet long before humans arrived 200 years ago. They could breathe fire hot enough to melt steel. Their claws could tear through ship hulls. And this one, the priest said, was cursed, but Finn did not run till he was 12 years old, small for his age, with dirt on his face and holes in his boots. Nobody would notice if he stayed. Nobody ever noticed him. That was the advantage of being an orphan in a colony that had already forgotten his parents died. The cage passed close enough for Finn to see through the bars. He expected rage. He expected violence. Every story about Stormwings talked about their fury, their hunger, their hatred for anything that walked on 2 legs. Instead, he saw grief. The creature lay curled in the corner of the cage. Its wing hung at a wrong angle, clearly broken. Deep wounds covered its body, some still bleeding, others crusted with infection. Its eyes, burning violet in the shadows, stared at nothing. It had given up. Finn recognized that look. He had seen it in his own reflection many times after his parents never came home from their research expedition. For one brief moment, the Stormwing turned its head. Its eyes met Finn's through the bars. Something passed between them. Not words, not thoughts, just recognition. 2 broken things seeing each other. Then the procession moved on, and the moment ended. That night, Finn sat on the roof of his shelter, a half-collapsed building at the edge of the colony that nobody else wanted. He could see the temporary compound where they kept the Stormwing. Guards patrolled the perimeter, both human and Morvani. The Morvani had arrived 3 days ago with demands. Their high priest, a tall figure named Aldra, spoke of prophecy and doom. Black-scaled Stormwings were cursed, he said. They brought catastrophe wherever they went. The only way to prevent disaster was the sacred sacrifice. They would drug the beast. They would burn it alive at dawn on the 3rd day. The ashes would be scattered to appease the sky gods. Governor Wells had agreed immediately. Human-Morvani relations were fragile. A war could destroy the colony. One dragon's life was a small price for peace. Nobody asked the dragon. Finn pulled his knees to his chest and watched the guards change shifts. He thought about his mother. She had been a xenobiologist, one of the first humans to study Stormwings in the wild. His father had been her assistant. They believed these creatures were intelligent, maybe even sentient. They died trying to prove it. Their research was archived somewhere, forgotten like everything else about them. Forgotten like Finn, he closed his eyes and tried to sleep, but every time he did, he saw those violet eyes. He heard the silence in that cage, not the silence of a monster. The silence of something that had lost everything and was waiting to die. The next morning, Finn made a decision that surprised even himself that he walked to the compound. He did not sneak or hide. He simply walked up to the fence and looked through. A guard shouted at him to leave. Finn left, but he had seen what he needed. The cage was positioned near the eastern wall. The guards changed every 4 hours. There was a gap in their patrol pattern, maybe 2 minutes long, just after midnight. That evening, he stole water from a supply depot. He took bandages from a medical station. He found an old jar of healing salve that his mother had made years ago, still hidden in the ruins of their family home. At midnight, he went back. The gap in the patrol was exactly where he expected. Finn slipped through the shadows like a ghost. He had lived on the edges of this colony for 7 years. He knew every blind spot, every forgotten corner, every path that adults never watched. The Stormwing sensed him before he reached the cage. Its head lifted slightly. Those violet eyes found him in the darkness. Finn froze, suddenly aware of how stupid this was. The creature could call out. It could rage against the bars. The guards would come. He would be caught. But the Stormwing stayed silent. Finn approached slowly, the way his mother had taught him to approach frightened animals. He held up the water container, letting the creature see it. He made no sudden movements. He kept his voice low and soft. "I know you can understand me," he whispered. "I do not know how, but I know. I brought you water and medicine. I want to help." The Stormwing watched him. It did not move. It did not make a sound. Finn reached through the bars with the water. His hand was shaking. One bite, and he would lose the arm. One breath of flame, and he would die. But something in his heart told him to trust this feeling, to trust those eyes. The Stormwing lowered its massive head and drank. Finn stayed for an hour. He cleaned the wounds he could reach. He applied the salve to the infected areas. The creature trembled under his touch, but never pulled away. When he finally left, slipping back through the shadows before the patrol returned, he looked back one last time. The Stormwing was watching him go. And for the first time since they brought it to this colony, it did not look like something waiting to die. Finn made a promise to himself that night. In 2 days, they would burn this creature alive for a crime it never committed. He was just a boy. He had no power, no weapons, no allies. But he was also human. And humans, his mother once told him, were the only species in the galaxy stubborn enough to change fate. He would find a way. Rain fell on the colony for the first time in months. Finn used the weather as cover. The guards huddled under shelters, more concerned with staying dry than watching an empty cage. They had no reason to suspect anyone would be foolish enough to visit a monster in the middle of a storm. He slipped through the fence with practiced ease. Water ran down his face and soaked through his thin jacket, but he did not care. In his bag, he carried more supplies. Fresh bandages, food he had saved from his own small portions, a blanket that still smelled like his mother's perfume, the only thing he had left of her. The Stormwing was awake when he arrived. It lifted its head as soon as Finn appeared, violet eyes glowing softly in the darkness. There was something different in its posture now. Less defeat, more awareness. It was watching him the way a person watches a friend approach. Finn smiled despite the cold rain running down his back. "I told you I would come back," he whispered, kneeling beside the cage. "I always keep my promises." He worked quickly that night. The infection in the creature's wing looked worse than before. Finn cleaned it carefully, wincing every time the Stormwing flinched. The creature never made a sound of complaint. It simply watched him with those ancient, knowing eyes. "The sacrifice is tomorrow night," Finn said quietly as he worked. "They will drug you at sunset. Then they will build a fire. They will put you in it while you cannot move or fight back." The Stormwing's eyes darkened. Not with anger, with acceptance. It knew what was coming. It had stopped hoping for anything different. Finn shook his head firmly. "No, I will not let that happen. I do not know how yet, but I will find a way to save you." He did not know if the creature understood his words, but something in its expression shifted. A small spark returned to those violet depths. Maybe hope. Maybe just curiosity about this strange human child who kept returning. When Finn finished with the bandages, he did something he had not planned. He sat down with his back against the cage bars and simply talked. He told the Stormwing about his parents, about how his mother used to read him stories about dragons from old Earth mythology, about how his father would carry him on his shoulders to watch the sunset over the alien forests, about the day they left for their expedition and never came back. "Nobody knows what happened to them," Finn said softly. "The colony sent a search party, but they found nothing. No Bothius, no equipment, just empty wilderness. People say a Stormwing must have killed them. They say that is why I should hate your kind." He paused, looking up at the creature through the bars. "But my mother loved Stormwings. She said you were beautiful and intelligent and misunderstood. She would never want me to hate something just because I was afraid of it." The Stormwing lowered its massive head until it was level with Finn's face. Slowly, carefully, it pressed its snout against the bars. Finn reached up and touched the warm scales. They were softer than he expected, like worn leather heated by internal fire. "I'm going to call you Storm," Finn whispered, "because you came into my life during one." The Stormwing, Storm, made a low rumbling sound deep in its chest. Not a growl. Something gentler. Something that almost sounded like agreement. The next morning, Finn was too tired to notice the woman following him. Dr. Rhea Sandoval was the colony's xenobiologist, one of the few scientists who continued the research Finn's parents had started. She was tall and thin with gray streaks in her dark hair and kind eyes that always seemed sad. She had tried to help Finn after his parents disappeared, offering him food and shelter. He had refused. He did not want pity. He wanted to be left alone. But Rhea never stopped watching out for him. And when she noticed his strange behavior over the past 2 days, she decided to follow. What she saw that rainy night changed everything she believed. She found Finn at the cage, sitting in the mud, his hand pressed against a stormwing snout. The creature that 3 dozen more Vani warriors had barely captured. The beast that had killed 4 of them before they brought it down. It was leaning into a human child's touch like a cat seeking comfort. Rhea stood in the shadows for almost an hour, watching. When Finn finally left, she intercepted him at the fence. Finn froze when he saw her. Fear flashed across his face, then resignation. He expected to be turned in. He expected punishment. He expected to lose the only friend he had found since his parents died. But Rhea simply looked at him for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Your mother would be proud of you." Finn blinked. Of all the things he expected her to say, that was not one of them. Rhea knelt down, so they were at eye level. "I knew your parents, Finn. I worked with them. They believed stormwings could form bonds with other species, but they never found proof. You just gave me proof. Are you going to tell the governor?" Finn asked. Rhea was quiet for a moment. "What you're doing could start a war. The Morvani take their sacrifices seriously. If you interfere, there could be consequences for the entire colony." "I know," Finn said, "but Storm does not deserve to die. Not like this. Not burned alive for a crime of being born different." Rhea studied his face. She saw a determination there that reminded her painfully of his mother. The same stubborn fire that had driven brilliant scientists into dangerous wilderness. "The sacrifice is tomorrow at dawn," she said finally. "Whatever you are planning, you have less than 12 hours. She reached in her bag and pulled out a small device. A plasma cutter, old but functional. "This belonged to my husband before he died," Reyes said, pressing it into Finn's hands. "It can cut through those cage bars in about 30 seconds. I will create a distraction at the Eastern Storage Depot. You will have maybe 5 minutes before they realize what happened." Finn stared at her, eyes wide. "Why are you helping me?" Reyes smiled sadly. "Because some things matter more than politics. And because your mother was my best friend. I will not let her son face this alone." She stood and walked away into the rain. Finn clutched the plasma cutter to his chest. Tomorrow, everything would change. He just hoped he was brave enough to see it through. The explosion lit up the eastern sky like a second sunrise. Finn did not wait to see the flames. The moment the storage depot erupted, he was already running toward the cage with the plasma cutter in his hands. Behind him, alarms screamed across the colony. Guards shouted and scrambled toward the fire. The Morvani priests, who had been preparing their ritual instruments, froze in confusion that it was chaos. Perfect, beautiful chaos. Finn reached the cage in less than a minute. Storm was already on its feet, violet eyes bright with sudden alertness. The Stormwing had sensed something different tonight. Something like hope. "We are leaving," Finn gasped, activating the plasma cutter. "Right now. Together." The tool bit into the bars with a high-pitched whine. Sparks flew into Finn's face, but he did not flinch. 20 seconds. 30. The first bar fell away. Then the second. He cut a hole just large enough for Storm to squeeze through. "Come on," Finn urged, stepping back. Quickly, Storm moved with surprising speed for a creature with a broken wing. It pushed through the opening, scales scraping against the remaining bars. For one terrible moment, Finn thought it would get stuck. Then the Stormwing was free, standing in the open air for the first time since its capture. It raised its head and breathed deep. Something like relief passed across its reptilian features. "This way," Finn said, already moving toward the colony's edge. "We need to reach the deep forest before they realize you are gone." They ran together through the pre-dawn darkness. Storm could not fly, but it moved fast on its 4 legs, keeping pace with Finn's desperate sprint. The boy knew every shortcut through the colony, every gap in the fences, every path that would keep them hidden from the main roads. Behind them, the chaos at the storage depot was beginning to settle. Soon someone would check on the prisoner. Soon they would discover the empty cage. Finn pushed himself harder. They were halfway to the forest line when the first shout came from behind them. Then another. Then the sound Finn had dreaded most, the hunting horns of Morvani warriors. "They know," Finn panted. "Keep moving. We're almost there." The forest edge was visible now, a wall of strange alien trees with bark like silver metal and leaves that glowed faintly blue. The deep forest beyond was sacred ground, forbidden to both humans and Morvani. Nobody went there. Nobody returned from there. That it was their only chance. An arrow whistled past Finn's ear. He ducked instinctively, nearly stumbling. More arrows followed, some striking the ground around them, others thudding into trees just ahead. The Morvani were gaining. Storm made a sound deep in its throat, something between a growl and a warning. It wanted to turn and fight, to face the creatures that had caged it and planned to burn alive. But with a broken wing and fresh wounds, it would not survive that battle. "No," Finn said firmly, grabbing hold of the scale on Storm's neck. "We fight later. Now we run." The Stormwing hesitated for just a moment. Then it lowered its head and ran faster. They were 50 meters from the tree-line when an arrow found its mark. Storm cried out in pain as the shaft buried itself in its flank. It stumbled but kept moving, blood streaming from the wound. Finn felt his heart crack at the sound. He had promised to save this creature. He had promised no more pain. Another arrow flew toward them. This one was aimed at Finn. He saw it coming, but could not move fast enough. His tired legs refused to respond. The arrow would hit him in the chest. He was going to die 20 steps from safety. Then Storm was there. The Stormwing threw its massive body between Finn and the projectile. The arrow struck its shoulder instead, joining the first. Storm roared in pain, but did not fall. It shielded Finn with its own flesh, taking the punishment meant for the boy who had shown it kindness. Finn grabbed Storm's leg and pulled. "Move! Please, Storm, move." Together, they crashed through the first line of trees. Silver bark scraped against scales and skin. Blue leaves fell around them like strange snow. Behind them, the pursuit slowed. The Morvani warriors stopped at the forest edge, their hunting horns falling silent. The deep forest was forbidden. Not even blood vengeance was worth breaking that taboo. Finn and Storm ran until they could run no more. They collapsed in a small clearing, both gasping for breath. Dawn light filtered through the canopy above, painting everything in shades of gold and blue. It was beautiful. It was peaceful. It felt like another world. Finn immediately went to work on Storm's wounds. The arrows had gone deep, but they had missed anything vital. He pulled them out carefully, apologizing with every tug, then packed the holes with the last of his bandages. Storm lay still throughout, violet eyes never leaving Finn's face. "We made it," Finn whispered when he finished. "We actually made it." Storm rumbled softly. Then, very slowly, it reached out with its long neck and pressed its snout against Finn's chest. The boy wrapped his arms around the creature's head, hugging it like he had never hugged anything before. Behind them, beyond the forest edge, they could hear distant shouts. The colony would be in chaos. The Morvani would be furious. Dr. Sandoval would face questions she could not answer. Everything was a mess, but here, in this quiet clearing, none of that mattered. Finn looked up at the unfamiliar trees, the strange sky, the wilderness that no human had ever mapped. He was alone with a wounded dragon in territory that could kill them both. He had no food except what he had grabbed in his escape. No shelter, no plan beyond survival. But he also had something he had not felt in 7 years. Hope. "We cannot stay here," Finn said softly, wiping blood from his hands. "They might break their taboo and follow us. We need to go deeper, further than anyone has gone." Storm lifted its head and looked into the forest depths. Something like determination hardened in its violet eyes. It rose unsteadily, favoring its injured side, but standing tall that it was ready to follow this strange human child into the unknown. And Finn was ready to lead them both somewhere safe. Together, they walked deeper into the forbidden wilderness, leaving the world they knew behind. Two orphans, bound by something stronger than blood. Two survivors, refusing to give up, whatever waited ahead, they would face it together. 7 days in the wilderness taught Finn more about survival than 7 years in the colony ever had, that he learned which plants were safe to eat and which ones made him sick for hours. He learned to find water by following the direction Storm's nose pointed. He learned that the deep forest was not as empty as the stories claimed. It was full of life, strange and wonderful and dangerous. But most importantly, he learned about Storm. The Stormwing was smarter than any creature Finn had ever known. Not just animal smart, genuinely intelligent in a way that scared and amazed him. Storm understood words, not just tone. When Finn pointed at something and named it, Storm would remember. Water, food, danger, safe, friend. Friend was Storm's favorite word. The creature made a soft, rumbling sound every time Finn said it. Their bond deepened with every passing day. They developed routines without speaking about them. Storm would scout ahead, using its keen senses to detect threats before they appeared. Finn would gather food and build shelters using skills he learned from his parents' old research journals. At night, they slept together, Storm's warm body curled around Finn like a protective wall. The broken wing was healing slowly. Finn changed the bandages every day, watching for signs of infection. Storm could flex the wing now, though flight was still impossible. Maybe in a few months, Finn thought. Maybe never. Either way, it did not change anything between them. On the 8th day, they found the other Stormwings. Finn heard them first, a series of deep calls echoing through the forest like thunder without rain. Storm lifted its head, violet eyes widening. It answered with a call of its own, and the sound that came from its throat was nothing like Finn had ever heard. Beautiful and haunting and ancient. Within minutes, 3 massive shapes descended through the canopy. Wild Stormwings. Fully grown, wings spread wide, scales shimmering in shades of gold and crimson and deep emerald. They landed around Finn and Storm, their eyes fixed on the small human child standing among them. Finn's heart pounded so hard he thought it might break his ribs. These creatures could kill him without effort. One breath of flame, one swipe of a claw, and he would cease to exist. But Storm moved between Finn and the wild ones. It stood tall despite its injuries and made sounds Finn could not understand. Low rumbles, high chirps, a language beyond human hearing. The wild Stormwings listened. They watched. One of them, the largest with scales like molten gold, stepped closer. It studied Finn with eyes that held ancient intelligence. Then it looked at Storm, at the bandages wrapped around its wounds, at the obvious care that had been given. Something passed between the creatures. A decision, an acceptance. The golden Stormwing turned and launched itself back into the sky. The others followed. Within moments, they were gone, leaving Finn and Storm alone once more. Storm turned to Finn and made that rumbling sound again. The one that meant friend. They let us stay. Finn breathed, hardly believing it. You told them about me, and they let us stay. Storm pressed its snout against Finn's chest. Yes, exactly that point. 2 days later, they discovered the temple. It emerged from the forest like a dream. Ancient stone walls covered in vines that glowed softly blue. The structure was clearly not human. It was old, older than the colony, maybe older than the Morvani themselves. Carvings covered every surface, images worn smooth by countless years. Finn walked inside with Storm following close behind. The interior was a single, massive chamber, open to the sky through a hole in the collapsed roof. Paintings covered the walls, protected from weather by some miracle of preservation. And those paintings changed everything Finn thought he knew. They showed Stormwings. Dozens of them, flying beside figures that looked almost like Morvani, but not quite. The same gray skin, the same tall frames, but wearing different clothes and carrying different tools. Partners. Companions. One image showed a black-scaled Stormwing with violet eyes standing beside a Morvani warrior. They were touching foreheads, eyes closed, bodies relaxed. Not master and beast. Friends. The black scales, Finn whispered, running his fingers over the ancient paint. They were not cursed. They were honored. He moved along the wall, reading the story in pictures. The black-scaled stormwings were rare, appearing only once in many generations. They were considered sacred. The bravest warriors would bond with them, forming connections that lasted lifetimes. The painting showed these bonded pairs defending villages, exploring unknown lands, bringing peace to conflicts. Then the images changed. Something happened. Finn could not understand what exactly, but the later paintings showed fear replacing reverence. The bonded pairs disappeared. The black-scaled stormwings were hunted instead of honored. The ritual that once celebrated unity became a sacrifice meant to destroy what the ancient Morvani no longer understood. They forgot, Finn said softly. Over centuries, they forgot what the bond really meant. They turned something beautiful into something terrible. Storm stood beside him, staring at the paintings with violet eyes that seemed to glow brighter than usual. Did it understand? Did it recognize its own ancestors in these ancient images? Finn reached out and placed his hand on Storm's shoulder. This is what we have. What you and I share. This is not wrong. It is not a curse. It is what was always supposed to happen. Storm made a sound unlike any Finn had heard before. Not the rumble of friendship or the call it used with other stormwings. This was something deeper. Gratitude. Understanding. A bond acknowledged for the first time. Outside, thunder rolled across the sky. A storm was coming, a real one this time. They would need to shelter here for days, maybe longer. But as Finn sat in the ancient temple with his dragon beside him, surrounded by paintings of truth long forgotten, he felt something settle in his chest. This was right. This was meant to be that he just hoped the world outside would see it that way too. The hunting horns returned on the 15th day. Finn heard them first, distant but unmistakable, echoing through the forest like screams of fury. He scrambled to the temple entrance and looked toward the forest edge they had crossed 2 weeks ago. Movement flickered between the trees. Torches, weapons, gray shapes advancing through sacred ground. The Morvani had broken their own taboo. They had entered the forbidden wilderness. Storm, Finn called, his voice tight with fear. They found us. They are coming. Storm rose from where it had been resting, its healing wing flexing against its side. The Stormwing's eyes narrowed, violet fire burning brighter. It wanted to fight. Finn could feel that desire radiating from its body like heat from a forge. Your wing is not strong enough, Finn said, placing his hand on Storm's neck. We need to run deeper. Find somewhere they cannot follow. But even as he said it, Finn knew they were running out of places to hide. The Morvani were not stopping. Their high priest, Aldra, had apparently decided that catching the escaped sacrifice was worth any cost, even breaking the most sacred laws of his people. They ran for 3 days. The forest grew thicker and stranger the deeper they went. Trees twisted into impossible shapes. Streams glowed with bioluminescent creatures. The air itself tasted different, heavy with something ancient and wild. But no matter how far they traveled, the sounds of pursuit never completely faded on the 4th day of running. They reached the canyon, IT stretched before them like a wound in the earth, walls of stone dropping hundreds of meters into shadow. There was no way across. Behind them, the hunting horns grew louder. The Morvani were close now, maybe hours away. We are trapped, Finn whispered, staring at the impossible gap. Storm, we are trapped. The Stormwing moved to the canyon's edge and looked down. Then it looked at Finn, then at its healing wing. A question in those violet eyes. No, Finn said immediately. Your wing is not ready. If you try to fly, you could fall. You could die. Storm made a sound, the same low rumble it always made when disagreeing. It stretched its wings experimentally. The injured one trembled, clearly still weak, but it held position. Storm looked at Finn again. The IT was willing to try. For him, Finn felt tears burn his eyes. You stubborn, beautiful creature. You would really risk everything to save me. Storm pressed its forehead against Finn's chest. Yes, obviously yes. But before Finn could respond, the hunting party burst through the trees behind them. 30 Morvani warriors spread across the forest edge, blocking any retreat. At their center stood Aldra, The high priest, his robe stained with mud and his face twisted with righteous fury. Human colony guards flanked him, their weapons raised. The chase ends here, Aldra called, his voice carrying across the clearing. Surrender the beast, human child. Perhaps we will show mercy. Finn turned to face them. His heart pounded. His legs shook. He was a 12-year-old boy standing against armed warriors with nothing but his own body. But he did not step aside. Storm is not a beast, Finn called back. And there is nothing to sacrifice. The ritual is wrong. The black-scaled storm wings were never cursed. Aldra laughed, a cold sound without humor. A child speaks of ancient rituals? You know nothing of our ways, little human. This creature is an abomination. Its existence threatens everything we hold sacred. Then your sacred beliefs are built on lies. The words came out stronger than Finn expected. He pointed toward the direction of the ancient temple. There are paintings in the forbidden forest. Old paintings, older than your current religion. They show the truth. Black-scaled storm wings were honored once. They bonded with your greatest warriors. The sacrifice ritual is a corruption of something beautiful. Silence fell over the clearing. Some of the warriors exchanged uncertain glances. Aldra's expression flickered with something, doubt perhaps, before hardening again. Ancient paintings mean nothing, the priest snapped. The gods have spoken. The sacrifice must be completed. He raised his hand. The warriors drew their bows. Finn did not move. Behind him, Storm growled low in its throat but stayed by his side. They were cornered, outmatched, facing death with nothing but their bond to protect them. Then Finn did something the Morvani never expected. He spread his arms wide and stood directly in front of Storm. A 12-year-old boy shielding a dragon with his own small body. Then you will have to kill me first, Finn said, his voice steady despite his terror. Because I will not let you murder my friend. Storm reacted immediately. It spread its wings, broken one and all, and covered Finn with its body. Two creatures protecting each other. A boy and a dragon, each ready to die for the other. The warriors hesitated. Even Aldra paused. There was something in this image that touched even the coldest hearts. Something pure. Something that felt ancient and powerful and right. And then the sky split open. The wild storm wings descended like falling stars. The golden one Finn had seen before landed on the canyon edge behind them. Others settled on the cliffs above. More circled overhead. Dozens of them, summoned by some signal beyond human understanding. They did not attack. They simply watched, witnessed. Their eyes glowed with intelligence that predated all civilizations. Finn stared up at them, understanding flooding through him like sunlight. Storm had called them, not with voice, with something deeper. The bond they shared was not just between them. It connected to something vast and ancient that Aldra's warriors fell back, terror replacing confidence. Surrounded by creatures that could destroy them in moments, their courage crumbled, but still, nobody moved. An impossible standoff, waiting for something to break. Finn held his ground, Storm's warmth against his back, wild dragons watching from every direction. Whatever happened next would change everything. The oldest Morvani stepped forward when nobody else dared to move. His name was Talvith. He was a scholar, not a warrior, brought on this hunt because he knew the forbidden territories better than anyone alive. His gray skin was weathered with age, and his eyes held a wisdom that Aldra's burning faith could never match. Talvith walked toward Finn and Storm with his hands raised in peace. The wild storm wings tracked his movement, but did not interfere. They seemed to recognize something in the old scholar, something that allowed safe passage. Child, Talvith said softly, stopping a few meters away. I need to see the paintings you spoke of. Will you show them to me? Aldra started to protest, but a warning rumble from the golden stormwing silenced him. The high priest was surrounded by creatures that could end his life with a single breath. For the first time, his authority meant nothing. Finn looked at Storm. The stormwing met his gaze, then dipped its head slightly. Trust this one. Follow me, Finn said. The journey back to the temple took hours. Talvith walked slowly, age weighing on his bones, but he never complained. The wild stormwings followed at a distance, silent guardians ensuring no tricks were played. Aldra and his warriors were forced to wait at the canyon, their hunt effectively over. When Talvith finally stood before the ancient paintings, he wept. Tears carved lines through the dust on his gray face as he traced the images with trembling fingers. He studied every scene, every figure, every faded color that told a story his people had forgotten centuries ago. The bonded ones, he whispered. I read about them in texts so old they crumbled when touched. I thought they were myths, stories told to children. He turned to Finn, wonder replacing grief in his ancient eyes. You found the proof. You, a human child, found what my people lost to fear and time. Finn stood beside Storm, one hand resting on the Stormwing's neck. The sacrifice ritual was wrong. It was always wrong. Talvith nodded slowly. The black-scaled Stormwings were never cursed. They were rare because they were special, sacred in the true meaning of the word. They appeared only when the bond between our peoples needed renewal. He looked at Storm, at the way the creature stood protectively beside Finn, at the obvious connection between human and dragon. And here, after all these centuries, the bond has returned. Not with my people, with yours. They returned to the canyon as the sun began to set. The wild Stormwings had not moved. Aldra's warriors still waited, fear keeping them frozen in place. But everything had changed. Talvith walked ahead now, his posture straight despite his age, carrying truth like a weapon that he spoke to Aldra first, then to the warriors, then to all of them, his voice carrying across the canyon with surprising strength. The sacrifice ritual was a corruption. The black-scaled Stormwings were sacred, not cursed. The bond between Finn and Storm was the very thing their ancestors had treasured most. By trying to burn this creature, they had nearly committed the greatest sin in their true history. Aldra listened with a face like stone. He did not want to believe. Everything he had built his power on was crumbling. But surrounded by wild Stormwings who could destroy him at any moment, and faced with paintings that prove his beliefs were lies, even his stubborn faith began to crack. In the end, he had no choice. The hunt was called off. The warriors lowered their weapons. Aldra turned and walked back toward the colony without another word, his authority shattered beyond repair. Finn watched him go, feeling no satisfaction, only relief. The return to the colony took 3 days. Word traveled faster than their feet, and when Finn and Storm finally emerged from the forest, a crowd had gathered at the edge of the settlement. Dr. Reyes Sandoval was there, tears streaming down her face. She had been released from custody after Talvith sent word ahead. She ran to Finn and wrapped him in an embrace so tight he could barely breathe. You did it, she whispered. You actually did it. Behind her, the colonists stared at Storm with a mixture of awe and lingering fear. The Stormwing stood tall, its healing wing folded against its side, violet eyes surveying the small human settlement. It made no threatening moves. It simply waited beside Finn, exactly where it belonged. In the weeks that followed, everything changed. Talvith worked with human and Morvani leaders to reform the old beliefs. The sacrifice ritual was abolished. New studies began, examining the ancient bond between species and what it could mean for their shared future. Finn was no longer an orphan on the edges of society. He became something new, an ambassador, a bridge between worlds. The first human to bond with a Stormwing in 1,000 years. Others began to follow his example. Slowly, carefully, more bonds formed. Rare, yes, but real. The wild Stormwings seemed to welcome it, as if they had been waiting for someone to remember the old ways. Years passed. Finn grew into a young man. Storm's wing healed completely, and when the Stormwing finally took flight again, Finn rode on its back. They soared over Vareth together, the wind tearing at Finn's hair, Storm's warmth surrounding him like an embrace. Below them, the world had transformed. Human and Morvani children played together near sanctuaries built for Stormwings. Bonded pairs patrolled the skies, keeping peace across a planet that had nearly torn itself apart over fear and misunderstanding. All because one lonely boy had looked at a caged dragon and seen something worth saving that on quiet evenings. Finn would sit on the cliffs, overlooking the colony, where he had grown up hungry and forgotten. Storm would curl around him, that familiar rumble vibrating through both their bodies. Two orphans who had found family in each other. Finn thought often about his parents during these moments, about their dream of understanding Stormwings, about the love that had driven them into dangerous wilderness. He hoped they could see what their son had accomplished. He hoped they were proud. "Thank you," Finn whispered one night, leaning against Storm's warm scales, "for trusting me when you had every reason not to." Storm made that sound, the one that meant friend, the one that meant family, the one that meant forever. Some bonds, Finn knew, were stronger than fear, stronger than death, stronger than the darkness between stars. And this was one of them.